Derek, the 1984-85 Oilers team was celebrated here this past week. They were named as the NHL's greatest team of the past century as part of the 100th anniversary event they held all year. You know, they did have a big crowd at Rogers Place. I mean, they have at least 14,000 people or so attend that. But some people are saying, oh, you know, the Oilers are dragging out the 1980s glory years and the gang too often. I mean, we've had a few things in the last few years. You know, ever since, I would argue, since the 1984 30th anniversary of the first Cup win, we've seen a lot of these 1980s Oilers celebrations. What do you think?
Well, the thing is about this 84-85 Oilers team is that this team, I think, beyond a reasonable doubt, was the best team in hockey. It was just a situation. You look at some of the Islander teams, how good they were, some of the Canadians teams, how good they were. But I don't think there was a team as dominant as that 84-85 Oilers teams. That they were destroying teams. They didn't lose a game the first 15 games of that year. They're coming off their first Stanley Cup championship. But they were so far ahead of everybody else. That's what made them the best team of the century. And I think that's something to, yes, to celebrate and to cherish and to be proud of the fact that that team came from Edmonton and that team was part of Edmonton. I grew up during that time. I watched those teams play. I was a huge fan of Gretzky and company and Messi and all those guys. I think the situation now is that when you keep bringing that team back together or that group of players back together, for whatever reason, whether it was the 30th anniversary of the Cup, which we had in 2004, whether it was the closing of Rexall Place where we had these guys come in, whether we had the opening of Rogers Place where they all came in, where we had the Glen Sather banner raising where they all came in. After a while, you start to think, well, that's really isolated. That's the only time those were the glory years. The Oilers have done nothing since then. So you look at 1990 when they won their last Cup, to now, what have they done? What have they accomplished? They've barely won a playoff series. I think 2006 was a situation where they went and obviously they made it to the Stanley Cup final. But apart from that, there hasn't been a lot of success with this organization. And I think this is where the bitterness or when people are a little cynical of the fact that they keep bringing these guys back and keep celebrating this team is because this team has not done anything since then. And I think that is one of the biggest problems. I think if the team had still been successful, if they, let's say, won a Cup in '95, and they'd say won a Cup in 2000, let's say they won that Cup in 2006, then I think it wouldn't be such a big deal about this 1984-85 team because they've had success beyond that. And I think a lot of people thought that with this new building, that they were going to move on. They were going to move beyond the glory years. They're going to leave the past in the past, and they're going to move on and forge a new future. They haven't done that. They're still holding on to the past, and I think that's one of the issues.
Yeah, and that would have been awesome if they won in '85 and 2006 and 2002. I think even just winning the playoffs in general. I mean, because you know, in the 1990s and the late 90s, the Oilers did win some playoff series, and they made the playoffs. And obviously, we've had a decade, you know, just not too recent, not in the far distant past, where they didn't make the playoffs at all, and they were getting #1 draft picks all the time. You know, and never mind the fact that we have all these great players who played for that team. I mean, never mind Wayne Gretzky, of course, you know, Mark Messier, but you know, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, Grant Fuhr, Glenn Sather, of course. All these guys were honored because they had their numbers retired. They were elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Like the Oilers aren't going to, you know, acknowledge that. And of course, those retirements, I mean, those came over you know, a number of years. I mean, Gretzky retired in 1999. We had the 2003 Heritage Classic as well, which was kind of a reunion. It was a reunion of sorts as well. So, and there's a lot to celebrate with that team. Yeah. It's just unfortunate that, you know, when it comes time to recognize 30th anniversaries and, you know, players retiring and Hockey Hall of Fame and jersey numbers being retired, it comes at a time when the Oilers aren't playing very well. And, you know, like you said, if the Oilers are playing well, I think obviously it's probably goes over a bit better with the public in general.
Well, that team set the bar so high, let's be honest. That team set the bar so high that no other team in the history of hockey is going to be able to get to that bar. But I think the Oilers have done such a poor job getting anywhere near it in the last decade. They haven't made the playoffs in 10 years and before last season. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. And I think that is part of the problem, is that there's such a huge gap between the glory years and right now. And I think fans would like to see that gap close a little bit, because you can't just remember back when. I think you need a new generation of fans. You need a new generation of players that people can look up to. And you think about it, if you're under the age of 40, you probably never saw Gretzky play as an Edmonton Oiler. And that is something to really think about. And there was a lot of people here at the celebration that were under 40, and they know what Gretzky has done, but they had never actually saw him play. So I think it's a situation that I think it's time for the Oilers to build some new memories and get some new traditions, new winning traditions, and it looks like there's still a bit of ways from it.